Sorry guys. I saw the latest Matrix movie, Matrix Resurrection, right before Christmas with some family members, and man, I'll say it once, that movie sucked. And guess what? The peers that was watching the movie with me, we didn't like it either. That movie really sucked. I don't hate it as much as Space Jam 2, and I don't hate it as much as Flora and Ulysses. Also, I don't hate it as much as Cruella or some other shit movie that came out this year. But also in hindsight, I don't think I hate it as much as The Eternals or Black Widow or Shang-Chi. This is one of those movies that my dislike to it is mostly about disappointment, and a huge one. And there's some moments that, of course, it pisses me off, but somehow this is one of those rare cases about this movie that it almost feels like you might want to understand it. You understand by saying, yeah, I understand why you did that, but you still did a shit job. Before I talk a little bit more details about this movie, let me give you a little bit of a background with me and the Matrix franchise. Because let me tell you that before I dive into Matrix Resurrection, I actually went and watched all 4 movies that came before it. And by the way, yes, I said 4 because I count the Animatrix. Okay, back in the day when the Matrix came out, I wasn't exactly the kind of guy who got into it. I was still kind of like in the phase that I did only like a certain limited cartoons, or well, limited kind of movies. I mean, like cartoons, fantasy movies. I was a little bit getting into horror, but I remember that the only thing that I knew about the Matrix, it was like, oh yeah, look at the poster. It's just these guys in trench coats and sunglasses. It didn't call my attention, but during that time, I do remember that the more I got exposed to the movie a lot, because everybody was talking about it. Everybody was about, you know, wow, look at this, it looks awesome. And I kind of believe it. The more, of course, the biggest thing that we all remember, but also even parody almost in college and all these things, is of course the so-called bullet time, you know, where Neo does the bullets like this, or something like that. I even saw it during that Matrix parody from Conker's Bad Fur Day. But it was pretty big, but it took me a while to at least watch at least some clips of it. And then I finally saw the movie and I thought it was good. But I wasn't exactly kind of like this sick-ass fan like many people were talking about it. But then years later, we've been hearing about The Matrix Reloaded. And I was actually into it because The Matrix, I was getting into the phase that I wanted to be in movies to talk about it because everybody was talking about it. But I also, during that time, one of my college teachers decided to show us some 3 of the Animatrix shorts, which are The Flight of the Osiris and and the two-parter, the Second Renaissance. And of course that I rent the movie in order to see all these shorts for myself. Then I watched Reloaded. I had an opinion about it, and which I'll go for it later. And then of course, I remember I had this kind of like this last experience with Reloaded. But then of course, the months later, then came make the Matrix Revolutions, and I gotta say that this one I like that better. But now that but these are all hindsight from what I remember during that time. But like I said, before I came out to watch the recent one, I decided to watch all four of them. It took me 2 days to watch all four of them. And these are now kind of like the current opinion that I do have. The first Matrix, it still holds up. But it holds up mostly as a time capsule and as a kind of like an important piece of cinema, of where all these effects come from. Because look, these effects, I will say that it was kind of a little bit ahead of its time, I'll say. More about how the camera angles was used and the excessive slow motion. Granted, nowadays when you see things like that, sometimes these effects are getting a little bit tiresome, to the point that I think that sometimes the Matrix inspire sometimes even movies that are pretty bad. Or like for example, what comes to my head is this piece of shit called Inception. I know that there's a lot of people who love Inception, but not me. I freaking hate Inception. I hate this movie. I hate Inception. But still, I have some level of respect to it, and I did pay attention to the lore, which is it's a little bit complex, but it's a little bit easier to understand once you get some knowledge out of it. Unlike Inception. But still, it had its goal. It had kind of like this story. I think it still holds up. Although some of the complexities, I think that it was a little bit too much for kind of like general audiences. And mostly, I think that general audience they're not buying it for the lore, but more for the eye candy that are the choreograph and the special effects. Then I saw the Animatrix again, all 9 shorts. Believe it or not, there's some that does hold up or not. And honestly, I like the Animatrix actually far kind of better than the original movie, as well as the other sequels. But it's mostly because I'm an animation buff. Although there's some that doesn't hold up. I'll say that, for example, one that is called Beyond, and another one that, the one also with the, well, I'll say that this one is the one that I remember that doesn't hold up to me the most. Although you can tell that this was more kind of like experimental in some ways or another, because you see actually 2 words from the guy who directed Cowboy Bebop, and one of them also, even in the character design style, is the guy who made AM Flux. I still like, if you ask me which are the shorts that I really like from the Animatrix, I'll say that they're probably Kid Story, Kid Story, a detective story, that noir that I also love. I really like also the two-parter Second Renaissance, because that actually makes sense, kind of like a prologue to the whole Matrix world, and it kind of shows that humans are jerks. And I know that it feels kind of like fictitious or something like that, but since I read Astro Boy, and it kind of had this It kind of also had this robot rights debate that it has. It kind of reminded me of that. Honestly, the Second Renaissance makes me think that is what happens if Astro Boy went wrong. And I also gotta give them credit for kind of like the ambition on the last flight of the Osiris, because this one was made by Square, and they used that same technology, which unfortunately failed. And for people who remember Final Fantasy Spirits Within, my apologies. And then after that, I watched The Matrix Reloaded. The second time in my life, I'll say, because I didn't want it to go back to that one. And it doesn't hold up. I still don't like Matrix Reloaded. Although I'll give it the benefit of the doubt that even though it had too much CGI, I still get a kick on the scene where Neo fights all the Agent Smiths. And many people like the driveway scene a lot more. Yeah, but I still like, having Neo fight off a kind of like a whole army of Agent Smiths. That one I get a lot of kick in. But now that I've seen it for the second time, I can also see why it didn't hold up, especially for me, because it was boring personally. A lot of the things were convoluted. Some characters were kind of recast. Most notably, the operator named Tank disappeared from the first movie, and now we got this other guy named Link, in which, for almost no reason, maybe the actor didn't come back, but at least, but also we got, the change from the woman named the Oracle, who it has kind of like this actress change, because unfortunately the original actor passed away before filming and all these things. But still, another thing that why the Matrix Reloaded doesn't hold up more story-wise, also apart from the convoluted lore and all these things, is that I did notice that there were some moments and scenes that it was chopped. It felt incomplete. And I was like, why is it incomplete? And all these things. And I will tell you why. Because I found out the answer, and even I had to make my research out of it. And the answer lies beyond a video game that came out last year. That same year, I mean. That same year, which is called Enter the Matrix. I never played that game, but at least to get ready to get an understanding of the lore, I decided to watch the cutscenes on YouTube. And I can see why this game sucked. It totally sucked. Although it feels like Reloaded was over ambitious and really dependent that the audience even play the game, which is a hard bargain, especially the way that they did that. And considering that, and I see why, some of the scenes that were unpolished or chopped that were on the movie, they're completed in the video game. So it was kind of like odd. So yeah, Reloaded doesn't hold up. But then came Revolutions. And unlike many people, which, okay, understandably they didn't like both Reloaded and Revolutions, but I am on the minority that I absolutely love Revolutions. Even today. Even for today, I like Revolutions because the pacing and the storytelling is much more straight and much more coherent compared to Reloaded, because again, Reloaded felt too dependent on the video game. Yeah, the plots, the elements are a little bit, between convenient or a little bit too fictitious and all these things. Yeah, sometimes when you work with movie magic, sometimes you break some rules, and which honestly I didn't mind. I mean, it's science fiction whatsoever, but I do remember that I did have kind of like a quasi good / bad experience in the movie theater, because honestly, this is one of those days in which I went to the movie theater on the same day that it became a worldwide premiere, and and it was nighttime. I remember that. I went to the movie theater after college. I bought my ticket, but because there was at the time in which no one gave you assigned seats, I couldn't get a seat for myself. So the whole movie, I had to watch it, sit down on the floor in the corridor. And you know what? I had a blast, I'll say. It's a popcorn flick. Sorry about that. My sister who sent me my Christmas photos. But anyway, Matrix Revolutions, it was a great popcorn flick, at least in my opinion. I still love the science fight against the machines. I love that. And because, well, it felt big. It felt like they gave it their all, at least on style. I know that it's style over substance, but I get a kick out of it. And the final battle between Neo and Agent Smith, that soundtrack is amazing. I love that soundtrack. It felt like, you know, this is where everything ends. It was kind of like one of those experiences that I had. So it's hard for me to give it a hatred to Matrix Revolutions. But either way, if you don't like it, it's fine. Even though I do understand why people kind of roll their eyes out. The ending, of course, is kind of debatable. But of course, I think that you have to count your blessings that we had at least some kind of ending of Revolutions. Because right now, whew, time to resurrect a dead horse. Alright, and now I find, after watching all 4 movies, I went to Resurrection. I refreshed the lore of the Matrix, since I was kind of like, okay, I gotta watch it and all these things. I watched it on a 4K TV, and boy, it was just a giant bore fest. Yeah, that's pretty much I have to say about this one. So, get this. Imagine that the movie show us what happened to Neo after his supposed death as a martyr in Revolutions. So the machines took him, and I thought I did kind of expect it, because in the lore they did say that Neo was kind of like the one. He was kind of like a special anomaly on the Matrix system, and that they needed him, you know, to make balance on the Matrix system and all these things. But I never imagined that his new life was gonna be as a video game designer who made the Matrix. And all these 3 events of the movie felt like it was just a movie. No, I'm not kidding. Somehow the franchise became meta. And I was at first it's funny, because it first started off with these kind of like this new character doing, you know, the usual. That I just slapped my head when they repeat a line from the first movie because of nostalgia. And then we have this blue-haired girl named Bugs. She's played by Jessica Henwick, and apparently this agent who is Morpheus, in which instead of being played by Lawrence Fisher, is played by this guy named Yahya Abdul Mateen too. So I was like, okay, what is going on? And also there were some moments in which, next to Buck, one of those, there was another guy who was kind of like the operator, but I was like, whoa, what do you got here? Every time that happens with her, in which they talk, and then the guy up here next to her, and I was like, oh, God, blind me. So, and by the way, remember that I talked to you about Neo being a game designer? Oh my God, that part was total cringe, because you see Neo, in this case, of course, adopting his his other name, what was it, Tom Anderson. And he's this washed-up game designer who is very popular, but he feels kind of like his life unfulfilled. He's, you know, surrounded with these young people who they're kind of like, wow, you're the greatest and all these things, and you know, we should do this and this and this. And then the way they begin to talk, it was almost like, hey, Warner Brothers told us that we're gonna make Matrix 4 or something like that. And I was baffled during those moments. I was like, what is going on? And then I asked one of my friends, and he was next to me, and I was like, is this really Matrix Revolutions? Didn't you, or did you accidentally put the documentary of the making of the Matrix or something like that? Because I thought I was watching a documentary, or a mockumentary. But I was like, what the is going on? It was weird, and yeah, Neo is also eating, you know, the blue pills, because the blue pill is the one that makes him be kept into this wonderland of the Matrix and all these things, and then of course we also had the return of Carrie-Anne Moss, alive and well, but instead of the character being named Trinity, she's been called Tiffany, and I was like, weren't you supposed to be dead? You were dead! The last movie, you were super dead. You got iron bars impaled through your heart. So, what are you doing here? Or maybe, I was like questioning myself. Because it felt real, because they were making reference after reference after reference to the old movies that I was like, what the hell is going on? And then, of course, later it's revealed that this is also part of the Matrix. He was living kind of like this fantasy. He feels washed up, and then the new Morpheus appeared, and it gives him the chance to, okay, eat the red pill. And then, of course, we get kind of like the battle scene in which the battle scene, of course. And then another odd part that happens is that the boss appears. And the boss of the game designing company, he appears, and Neo was like, Smith? And I was like, what? Smith? That's not Hugo Weaving. That's not Hugo Weaving. And it's not. It's Jonathan Groff. Okay, before I talk a little bit more in detail about the other character and all these things, let me run down a little bit of a synopsis story, in which, yeah, he wakes up back into the Matrix. He finds also Trinity, you know, into the Matrix, in which it was odd, because for me, she was supposed to be dead, and also when Neo wakes up, it was like, he had his eyes also, you know, right, and I was like, odd, because his eyes were electrocuted and burned to crisp. So he was blind. And then he gets rescued by kind of like the new generation of robots, by, you know, by Bugs and her other group, in which they're also red pillars that they admired him. He kind of became a little bit of, you know, a revered guy. And then he goes back to another city that came after Zion. So it's no longer Zion, now it's called IO. I think it was 60 years that happened ever since the third movie. And then, of course, Neo finds out that there was another war between robots. Although some of the machines, they began to ally with the humans, and one of the generals is, of course, Niobe from the other movies. And well, but she also has a company. She has, you know, she headbutts against Bugs, because she's a captain that doesn't obey orders. And of course, let's say that after all this, then it turns into kind of like a heist film in order to rescue Trinity. That's the plot, I'll say. And yes, it's as convoluted and boring as it is, because let me tell you, I think it takes almost like 30 or 40 minutes until we finally get out of that kind of like this lost episode. That's kind of like the deleted scene of Free Guy. And boy, that it was so meta. I'll get to that when times do. But then it gets also a little bit entertaining, because I was getting into the new how things went on after revolutions. But God, that it still felt like I was watching kind of like a carbon copy of the first movie. And then it gets a little bit interested, but still it felt so dull that I kind of almost was uncaring. I was just watching the movie and saying that, when this is over. Okay, acting. Honestly, I'm pretty sure that these actors can do better. And of course, most of the characters, well, kind of suck. It's still a little bit of a depressing movie because this is another one of those movies in which it suffers of that middle-age syndrome, in which it say that, well, I'm too old, years happen, and now you gotta look for the new generation here and there. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like Keanu Reeves. Keanu Reeves was good as Neo, but you can tell that he's still a little bit more washed out, and also kind of like he was just there just to be there. It doesn't feel like the original Neo. Although I know it kind of mature or something like that, but the biggest thing that kind of bothered me a lot about this movie is that the more I saw Keanu Reeves in playing Neo, and at least in this movie, I didn't feel like I was watching Neo. He didn't look. I felt like I was watching another version of John Wick, because honestly, at least cut his hair or the beard. Keanu, I know that you might have, everyone wants to keep, the hair that makes you comfortable, something like that, but you have to swallow your pride sometimes when you're acting, because honestly, there was no difference between John Wick and this Neo. So that was odd. Called it a little bit kind of like a nitpick. Carrie-Anne Moss, she returns as Trinity, and she's good. I would say that she's probably one of the best actors that there was. The character of Trinity, it was mostly kind of like, honestly, I didn't buy, even in the other movies, I think that Trinity was also kind of like a staple of these kind of movies, like the girlfriend who is the one that brings out the power of love or something like that. And honestly, I do have mixed feelings between their chemistry or something like that. But that's just me. The woman who played this little captain named Bugs, she was fine. The other actors were just okay, but I do have to complain that a lot of the new cast, they are really, really forgettable, because no one has kind of like this upstart personality, and unfortunately it makes us care even less with them, because they gave you the names, but they were like, okay, what do you do? Okay, you do this and all these things. I mean, wow, that I don't even remember the names of those movies, of those characters. Take for example, in the other movies, at least I remember Link, I remember Tank, I remember the kid. I remember the General Mifune. I remember at least kind of like most of these characters. Hell, what was it I was going? I think too that I was watching I kind of say the cutscenes of Enter the Matrix, I even remember Ghost, and Ghost kind of is stepped on the sideline on the other movies. How's that possible? Oh. And of course, the change of Yahya Abdul-Mateen to play the new Morpheus. And by the way, when I mean new Morpheus, because apparently the other Morpheus kind of became, they didn't specifically say what happened to him. He was kind of like in the other side, and he kind of died in an online game from what I heard from others. I didn't understand it, but apparently they made a statue of himself and all these things. But the thing is that they kind of replaced this new Morpheus into a younger version, apparently, that he shows up into the Matrix, sometimes dressed up like he's kind of gonna host a circus. And also but also in the real world, he's kind of like this being made of nanobites or something like that. And of course, there's also actually two villains in this movie. One of them, of course, I'm talking about, what was it, Jonathan Groff, who is the Agent Smith, the new Agent Smith, and boy, that he sucked. He sucks because he doesn't have the presence and the acting chops of Hugo Weaving. Man, because Hugo Weaving, sometimes he goes over the top, but at least you bought that he was a menace. You bought that he was threatening. He was, you know, when he says Mr. Anderson, I don't have the same acting chops, but still, he compared this guy who you were weaving to Jonathan Groff. My God, it was awful, totally awful. This guy, didn't feel it. He felt like a little bit too young and sometimes too restrained to have a presence. He was pretty much a pretty boy. So, and even his motivations kind of didn't make sense. He kind of became a little bit of the anti-hero in this case. And also, speaking of which, why he's Agent Smith? Wasn't he supposed to be dead? And of course, we got kind of like the new villain, of course. The new villain, believe it or not, is Neil Patrick Harris playing Neil Patrick Harris. No, I'm just kidding. It's Neil Patrick Harris playing the analyst. I think I did mention in my 8-bit Christmas that I have the tendency to make the running joke that ever since I watched Harold Kumar, I always say that here's Neil Patrick Harris playing Neil Patrick Harris. And guess what? He plays kind of like he started out being kind of like the psychologist of Neo during his work group and the game design and all these things. And he's kind of like, you have to do this, you must not say the word trigger because, well, no, you must not say the word crazy or something like that. It's kind of like a strong word, something like that. Yeah. But, and he also shows up with these, twice I think, he showed up with these purple glasses and I was like, geez. And honestly, also, there were times that he shows up with the same haircut as Jonathan Groff, and there are many times that I did confuse him as the Agent Smith, and I was like, what? Dude. But yeah, he still plays Neil Patrick Harris, which I know that Neil Patrick Harris is pretty much known, to playing comedic or family-friendly characters / villains. But I know he can do well. I mean, I know that he played Count Olaf in the what was it? Series of Unfortunate Events TV series or Netflix series. I don't remember. But either way, that one. Well, once I did learn that he was Neil Patrick Harris, it all made sense. He was still playing Neil Patrick Harris. Cinematography, I will say that there was nothing special. I will say that for cinematographic levels, it was kind of a little bit of a step down compared to the other movies, because honestly, one of the things that many people admire from the Matrix movies, even the questionable sequels, is that it had a choreography that some of them actually holds on its own up to this day. It was kind of like those fighting choreographies were impressive, and it kind of also did help on with the camera movement, all these things. I mean, the fight scenes were really memorable on the other movies. I already mentioned, like for example, we have memorable scenes. Like for example, I can name it from the top of my head. Like the first movie, we have the shootout in the building. The second movie, at least in my part, Neo battling this army of Agent Smith. Or in the third movie, the final stand in Sion. And of course, the final battle between Neo and Agent Smith. See, I can at least name 3 moments that are remarkable on those movies. And you can see that they have kind of like impressive moves in all of these. Let's take, for example, again these examples. The fighting in the buildings. You see them, making their flips and just, shooting all those people, and you can see, the concrete smashing all. It becomes a huge disaster, And let's not forget, of course, that in that movie we also had at the beginning that crane kick. The second movie, you see, I still remember, Neo getting trampled by all these Agent Smith and using a lead pipe and how he had to battle them. It's amazing, I'll say. And then of course the battle against the Last Stand in Sion in Revolutions. I do like the machines, the higher stakes that they had in this one, and of course the rain, the lightning in the final battle, and all these things, and that kick-ass music. And by Resurrection, no, there was almost nothing kind of, how can I say, nothing kind of like a fresh move or something like that kind of makes me remember. I mean, there's the battle, let me try to count the battles, I'll say. There is the initial one that is mostly a carbon copy of the first movie. Then there is the battle in the game designing company. Then there comes another one that is kind of like in a garage, and of course and then there's the final stand. It's just mostly kind of like but this one is mostly kind of like a bicycle chase, and that Neo now washed up of his power. He doesn't use most of his powers. The only thing that he kind of remember is stopping the bullets with his telekinesis. That's the best way I can describe the powers that he had. But I don't remember much about something kind of like creative or something like that. Oh, maybe one thing, but that was kind of like unintentionally hilarious. I don't care if I spoil it, because honestly, there is one moment that actually made me chuckle. You know what? I'll leave it when I mention some of the story elements, I'll say. And you know what? Maybe I'll go with it right now, in which, honestly, I don't know what was happening with this movie at first. Remember that I told you that it started out being too meta. It's kind of like making fun or complaining about, the movie and all these things. But honestly, I don't know why, but it kind of felt kind of like mean-spirited. I mean, I know that the movie was written by one of the Wachowski brothers, which I forgot to mention them because I thought that it didn't matter. Because honestly, as much as I have some certain respect to the Wachowski brothers, I don't like a lot of the some things that they done. I despise Speed Racer. I never saw a Cloud Atlas, and I hated Jupiter Ascending. So, so I have kind of like question with them. Although this one is only written by one of them, but the way it was written, all these things, is kind of like feeling that they lost their pride. They're not proud of what they have done, and honestly, an artist that lost their pride and rejects their project is mean. At least for me, it's kind of like they lose their pride, and this feels so washed out, but that it was like mocking itself. This is the reason. This is also kind of like one of the few reasons why I'm afraid of watching Freddy's New Nightmare, which I heard it has kind of like the same tone, in which is Wes Craven kind of shitting on his own project, and honestly, I find this sad and pathetic. I don't like wash out pathetic. I don't like to wash it. Sorry, no, pathetic. I was repeating word pathetic. I don't like a wash out artist who rejects their old work and saying that, oh my god, what have I done, or something like that. And you look at this fandom or something like that. Those are, and you know what? Those are worse of an ingrate. I know you might have your rejections, your regrets or something like that. Everyone does, but still, it's like rejecting your own baby, and I hate that. I hate that. This is, again, I'm afraid of watching Freddy's New Nightmare. Because I don't want to see Wes Craven, just being a washout artist who he just say that he just regrets his work. And you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. Please help me out in this one. If I'm wrong, please let me know. I might be happy to see it, and probably I might change my opinion if I get the courage to watch it. But still, going into Revolution and doing like that, I was like, what? Which kind of reminds me that there is this Spike Chunsoft game that it kind of plays out like that too, and guess what it did? It divided the fan base. Although, don't get me wrong, I like meta jokes sometimes. But sometimes you need kind of like to know the mood or the place that you're doing. And honestly, if that could have happened in The Matrix, maybe that could have been used. At least at the end of Matrix Revolutions. But not when you're rebooting the whole thing. Because then, that means that you are not fond of what you created. Even mistakes or not, you still own them. Speaking of things from the past, yeah, I did mention that there's some moments that copy the first movie. Like, for example, again, the line almost in the intro, they repeat the line, "They're already dead" or something like that from the first movie. But let me tell you that a lot of the elements from the first movie are technically copied in the first half. The pacing, the elements, how it's going on, it's so familiar. So familiar, and so it's almost like they got a Xerox machine from that in order to put the element from the first movie, saying that, okay, to reboot it, we're gonna do kind of like the same pacing, Neo doing a mundane job, then he gets the chance, to eat the blue pill or the red pill. He finds out that he's in the Matrix, and of course, he even ends up in the same practicing virtual kung fu alongside Morpheus. At least it's kind of like this half where the similarities to the first movie stops, and then we go to another movie that actually picks on kind of like feeling a little bit like a proper sequel, but still Oh my god. Let's not forget that this movie apparently has PTSD because sometimes it begins to flashback for seconds scenes from the previous movies. No, seriously, it's like that. Remember this? Remember this? Remember this? Yeah. And sometimes we even get the return of a few characters. I already mentioned that, of course, the General of the New City, I.O. She's Niobe. Man, that she kind of became kind of like this grumpy woman. Almost like I don't know, I was kind of confused on her motivation of being angry or something like that. I know that she wanted to be kind of like overprotective, but she felt like she was more pissed at Neo from saving the world than being grateful from it. Yeah, she wasn't a believer of, the prophecy, but still, prophecy or not, Neo technically did something. And he took a gander. Although I gotta admit that I do like that. I do like, they did change something in which there is indeed a certain peace between humans and machines. The machines also, they get a little bit more kind of like an upgrade. And also we get kind of like seeing these cool robots like these cool robots instead, the Sentinel that they're kind of like octopus or something like that. But still in my head, it was like, well, that's a big step up, but still humans, they're not admitting that they are the ones that started this. Because, yeah, I'm just, referencing the Animatrix, the second Renaissance. Another returning character that it was more of a cameo is Lambert Wilson at the Merovingian, in which, oh my god, what did they done to him? He became a nutcase because apparently, because the new Matrix, in which basically it was Neo and Trinity kind of being the new source of the new Matrix. They decided to discard the kind of like the old programs. And this guy, who was kind of like who was the French guy in the first in the other movies, the French guy who had kind of like this black market deals or something like that. Now he became kind of like this bearded guy from a group called the Exiles, which is kind of like rejected programs. And every time he was on screen, he overacted the hell out of it. And he begins to kind of like spout out marketing self-aware propaganda or ads or something like that, whatever you want to call it, and all of those lines were so cringy. And another character that returns is, remember the little girl from the third movie? The girl that finds Neo in the limbo subway, and then she befriends the Oracle, something like that. Well, she's there, now they're growing up or something like that. That's all I have to say much about this. Man. What else I could talk about this movie? Oh yeah, I also want to tell you that I almost forgot to tell you that, yeah, the movie is kind of like aware that times changes or something like that, and I'm getting a little bit sick of that, that what is happening in these revivals, in which it's like, well, time move on, and you have to get with the times or something like that. Good change, you have to be with the change or something like that. And I was like, the more I think about this lesson, I know that it's kind of like a depressing nature of humanity and evolution. It's still depressing as hell, and although I did kind of want to accept that they wanted to update some things for the Matrix. For example, I gotta admit that I do like that instead of using phones in order to go back to the real world, now that we are now using smartphones, they have to go through glass or mirrors. Mirrors. Yeah, because they wanted to emulate, Alice Alex through the looking glass. Yeah, because they also made reference to Follow the White Rabbit or something like that. how deeper you go into the rabbit hole. Yeah, and also they kind of begin to ditch a lot of the agents. In which that the agents technically they possess the people because they're programs that override themselves in order to catch who they're following. This time, instead of agents, they're now called bots, in which apparently it makes people kind of turn into kind of like robots. Well, not robots, digitized zombies, in which they don't. It kind of became kind of like a Matrix version of a zombie movie. And this is the moment that I wanted to talk to you about, and I don't care if I spoil it, because there's one scene that I will always remember, which is kind of like unintentionally funny, and I wish they did more about this one. It's kind of like this motorcycle scene that is technically happening in the climax of the movie. And then what happened is that apparently the one who controls everything, which is of course Neil Patrick Harris, he controls all these swarm of zombies that are in buildings, and he made a bunch of them drop to their doom like bomb. They call it kind of like bombers, but they just then jumping out of the window like and plummeting to their quote unquote death. I found it a little bit unintentionally hilarious, and I don't know why they call them bombs, because they don't destroy anything. They just go splat. This is one of those moments in which I wish, you know what would make funnier? I wish that instead of going, they exploded like Birdemic bombers. Like the birds from Birdemic. Oh my god, this is the moment that you needed explosions, you didn't get it. That whoop. You know what? If someone could make a clip of this those scenes and make that every time one of those bots jump to their doom and land on the ground. Every time they do that, they explode. That I would love to see that. Oh, yeah, and also speaking about the dead. Did I mention also that this movie feels like there is no danger and no risk factor? Because not only the movie kind of has this abuse of the now officially called bullet time. Nobody dies in this movie. Nobody, and I swear that not even the villains die. So the sense of urgency or danger is lost. And I might sound mean-spirited, but I think that maybe you could have gotten something if Trinity stayed dead. Because there's even the scene in which they get their bodies and they repair their bodies. Neo's and Trinity's bodies. To Neo, it repairs his eye or something like that. But at least I could have bought Neo surviving because Revolution at least ended ambiguous in which he dies or something like that. That I could have bought. But Trinity, no. You see her die. She stops breathing. Her heart is impaled. And so she stays dead. She was confirmed dead. So there was no reason to bring her back, except for one, nostalgia. Two, they wanted returning actors, some of them, and three, because they wanted to put a kind of like saying that they're an element almost at the end of the movie in which I don't care if I'm gonna spoil it. Well, maybe I'm gonna give this hint that let's say that the chosen one It's not gonna be exactly the chosen one. In which, honestly, when that moment came, I didn't feel it. I didn't feel bad because at least according to the architect, he did imply that anyone can be. It's just that Neo became an anomaly by circumstances or something like that. That's from what I understand. So I was fine with it. Although, well, let's say that the ending feels like an open book that feels a little bit kind of like, well, we got there. That's it. We don't get to explore more about Io, except that we only know that they're now making technology to create strawberries from digitizing things. It's almost like a glorified 3D printer. Man, I wish I could make food with 3D printer. Isn't that great? Maybe I'm gonna give Resurrection a little bit of credit with that. But honestly, I think that's all I had to talk about this movie, in which it was so boring and disappointing, and all these things that kind of feel like it didn't matter. But for me, actually, it felt really pretentious. I understand what it wanted to do, but I don't share the same opinions of kind of like a washout artist who kind of just looked at the past and feels kind of like bitter about it. Very bitter from his own work. It shows that they have no love on what they're doing, and even some of the flaws. Yeah, we might regret it, but sometimes you have to be a little bit thankful to that. Well, that's pretty much the way I can call Resurrection. Resurrection, indeed it is. It's much more just a resurrect. It's trying to resurrect a dead horse, which is kind of, they're trying to resurrect a franchise that it had mixed feelings about it. Some people still like the first movie, although there are also mixed feelings between the Animatrix, reboot. No, reboot. Reloaded, and Revolutions. And the less people talk about the Enter the Matrix, the better. Oh my God! I kind of missed the opportunity by saying that whenever we got to the game design scenes, in my head, I was imagining Neo making Enter the Matrix or Path of Neo, whatever. There are people who like Path of Neo. I never played it. I don't these things. But still, yeah, it was a poor attempt to revive the franchise. They tried a little bit their best during the second half, but it wasn't enough. It felt like it was just disappointing. It really sucked. We weren't entertained. We were just mostly bored out of our minds. And honestly, if only the Wachowskis could be a little bit more passionate on their project like they did the last time. Maybe, now that I think of it, maybe being over the top could have worked out in its favor. I know that I said I hate Speed Racer, although some people do love Speed Racer. But because it's over the top or something like that, maybe that could have helped. So, do I recommend it? Absolutely not. I think that it had a finale. They had the finale on Revolutions, but they didn't do it. It's just now what we got is just resurrected, and it's still a Frankenstein monster of something that shouldn't have been resurrected. Sometimes, well, it's like a wise man said, sometimes dead is better.